So in this quick lesson, I wanted to go over gradient meshes and how you can kind of add some of the trends that I've talked about in the previous video. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm in Adobe Illustrator right now, and I'm going to grab the pen tool. We're just going to create kind of one of those curvy shapes that we saw in some of those design trends. So we're just going to just make a real curvy shape. There is no wrong way to make a curvy shape. Just kind of experiment with the pen tool. Go ahead and complete my shape. And the great thing about gradient meshes, it's a very easy tool to use. And so here's the gradient mesh tool right here. Just go ahead and, it's normally the gradient tool, but just hold down. And I'm going to go ahead and click anywhere on this piece, and it's going to add some anchor points. Let's click right here in this area, and you'll notice it adds several anchor points where we can change the color points on each one of those. Let's click again over on this other side. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our direct selection tool, we're going to zoom in, and we're going to start selecting colors for our gradient mesh to kind of get that dynamic pops of color. And so one of the keys about a successful gradient mesh is kind of having a combination of highlights and lowlights, so brighter colors and maybe darker versions of that same color. So I'm going to go ahead and take the direct selection tool, just kind of make some selections. I'm going to stay kind of in the warmer pink tones. And I'm going to continue to select different ones. So right up here, I'd like to maybe consider that a highlight. So I'm going to select a couple of these. Now you could take your eyedropper tool and sample the color that you just did down here, but you can also make it lighter or brighter to kind of add a sense of highlights, kind of gives it a little bit of a depth to it. Same thing here, just take your eyedropper tool and you can sample. And so down here, you can always move and shift these around. You can even take this and be able to add curves to and bends to your colors. Okay, so let me go ahead and sample this pink, but also go maybe a little bit into the blues. Just kind of dive into a blue, just creating that dynamic pop of color. I'm going to continue to do the same thing, maybe make this darker since it's toward the bottom. Maybe that is a low light, so I'm just taking a darker version of that purple. You can kind of see this coming together. You can go ahead and take that direct selection tool, double click and move down, add a little bit of curve, and then add some color. Maybe start adding some blues. We haven't done any blues, so I'm just going down the scale here, adding that pop of color. I'm going to continue to do this for the rest of the anchor points to create kind of a dynamic effect. So I took a few moments to mess around with the other anchor points and add color swatches that I thought kind of added a nice dynamic clash of color. And you notice I have some warm tones up here and maybe some lighter, the lightest shade up here to kind of add a sense of highlights. And down here I added some cooler colors, so those warm and cool colors slowly blend together to create something pretty dynamic. So I went ahead and took the direct selection tool, and you'll notice down here I have this kind of interacting, almost coming together. And you can do this by messing around with the anchor points with the direct selection tool. Go ahead and shifting some of these around to kind of get that clash of color. So you notice how this line intersects with this one that comes right down here. So that's kind of how I made that little bit of effect there. Go back to where I was. And so you can always change, you can change the photo out, you can play around with this. I'm going to go to my transparency panel and mess around with some blending modes, kind of see if I can get this to fade back so you can see a little bit of the photo behind it. This was the final result. I added a little pop of color on the upper right hand side and created an ad from this, kind of the anti-bank ad. Banks usually stay pretty safe when it comes to color, so this one has a little bit of a different personality. So gradient meshes, have fun, play around with it. I teach some lessons on gradient meshes on Skillshare and on Udemy. I go in a little bit more in-depth guide with those. So hopefully you'll enjoy this trend in 2019 and beyond.